Hey guys, what's up? This is Neena Perez, and this is Straight Talk, no sugar added. Thank you so much for being here. As you know, this show is created to discuss real life topics, to grow, challenge, and transform your thinking. And today I found Chandler Walker, so he's going to be on here. He's the one in the hot seat here at Straight Talk, and he's an entrepreneur who has scaled his businesses to seven-figure levels and created a therapeutic-driven, psychologically based sales system. And I love that. We're going to touch on that. And it's centered around compassion and care, which, Chandler, we barely hear those words nowadays, right? Compassion and care. So I'm really loving this. So Chandler, thank you for being here with us. I have a really great audience of entrepreneurs. So I think this is going to be a fantastic conversation. And just tell us a little bit about you. Who is Chandler? Who are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk to everybody about how to essentially flip the sales world upside down and feel
Love that.
good
Mm-hmm.
about selling. And about me, I grew up with a bipolar mom, and so I learned from a young age how to communicate from a neutral level. So when she would be on ups and downs, I learned how to communicate and sort of walk her up and down the cliff. And it taught me to remove my ego from the equation, communicating with another human being, and how to ultimately step into their head and try to understand their model of the world, which
Wow.
led me to a med school path, and that's kind of where the began.
That's really interesting, right? I think the biggest challenges in our life is how you step up to them, right? And when you're dealing with somebody who has, a bipolar or other, mental health issues, right? Whether it's narcissism or whatever people are dealing with, it it teaches you a lot about emotional intelligence. And that's pretty interesting that you decided, even young, to learn how to communicate at her high levels and at her low levels, because that's a very difficult thing for the person who is diagnosed with that. It is a very difficult thing for them to be able to navigate that in their own life, right? So how old were you, do you think, when you started to realize that this is the form of communication you're going to have to start learning?
Yeah, I don't know if I was actually a specific age, but I knew growing up that I've always been the person who's been pretty level-headed, even as a kid, and
Mm.
I've always been pretty analytical, sometimes to the point of overthinking when I was younger. And so as growing up, I would think about, like, what do people do? Why do people do these things? What makes them do it? When they do it, how did the other person have sort of a position inside of that conversation or inside of that issue? And then I would just break these things down to like the molecular
Mm.
level as a kid. And after thinking about it for a while, it always came down to, well, I can't really control where she's at, but I can kind of control the flow, and I can control the communication, and I can control how I communicate, and ultimately whether or not I make sure. And it's been a pretty powerful method of communication, because now I'm in a position to where I've been able to continue to carry that, and I can talk to people in a way to where they feel heard, they feel listened to, they don't feel judged, and you create a whole new dynamic of
Awesome.
listening.
Yeah. That is a whole new dynamic of listening, right? It's listening at a deeper level. It's not just listening, but also watching body language, knowing what they're intending to say, maybe even the emotion behind what's being said, right? So that's really really interesting that that's the angle that you decided to take. I mean, obviously, it served you well, right? Because it seems like that communication style has helped you navigate and grow the businesses that you've created. So I wanted to talk to you about that too, right? Because how did you get into business, and what kind of business did you get into?
Yeah, good question. So I went into college for a med school pathway, but when I was going through the pathway, what I kind of recognized was I wasn't necessarily in here to help people. I was here to sort of look at a book and give medication, because people need medication or want medication, and
Mm,
doctors don't really have the ability to follow through. So as doctors, it's just the way the medical system is organized. You provide pills, pills make people better, they go away, they come back, get more pills. And that's not really what I got in the game for. So I felt pretty disenfranchised by the whole system. And I chose to break off. And at that point, we opened up a brick and mortar that was a wellness facility. And we
mm.
help people in 6 pillars of wellness: mental health, social health, sleep, nutrition, fitness, and habits. And in order to work with, it was a higher end price. So that's when I started beginning my journey in creating a psychotherapeutic sales system.
Wow. Wow. That's deep, right? And that's like touching almost every area of the human aspect as well, right? So that's a big that's a big thing to take on. Like, let's open up a brick and mortar and make it about everything,
Yeah,
right?
let's do it all.
That's awesome. So that's how you started. Is that something that you're still doing today? Like, do you still do the health and wellness aspect of it, or what are you doing right now currently?
Yeah, so we're still doing the health and wellness aspect. What I did was in the beginning, we had the brick and mortar, and then I started deciding that we needed to be global. We had people all over the
Mm.
world kind of asking because we had such a unique product. So I started to branch that and build that into an online environment. We built an app, we built a curriculum, we built the ability to have coaching sessions, everything online and virtual. So then when the pandemic took off or went crazy and shut everybody
Mm.
down, we were able to essentially sell our brick and mortar and move straight into online and grow 1,800%
Wow.
during what was a horrible time for a lot of business owners. At the same time, that's kind of when Compassion Conversations, the sales system, was born, because I had to learn to sell this myself. You have a $1,500,
Mhm.
$3,200 plus product for consumers who see it as an expense. And so I started to have to work with sales coaches and sales trainers. And that's when I got disenfranchised on this side of things.
Right.
And I tend to be a creator.
Sorry, you froze a little bit. So you tend to be a creator, and so when you went to what is it actually that disenfranchised you though, right? Because I got the medical part of it, right? So in the medical part of it, or when you were going to medical school, you realized you didn't want to be just a pill pusher. You wanted to help people at a deeper level. I get that. I used to be a medical assistant, an ultrasound technician, and I remember that part of it also affecting me. Also just got like, I can't do this, right? But what bothered you or pulled you away from the sales aspect? What made you create this therapeutic driven type of sales system?
Yeah. So originally I created this just to solve this and then to solve the problem for our sales teams. And then eventually we
Mhm.
branched out to create a separate program that people could go through. And the thing that disenfranchised me most was I would work with a sales trainer and they'd say, you've got to stick them with the knife and then twist it. If they cry, they buy. If you're not doing 90 minutes of objection handling, you're not doing it right. And I thought the whole focus on sales was
Mhm.
trying to get someone to make a forced decision and manipulate to a short-term decision. And to me, I opened this health business to help change people's lives. And I felt like manipulating people to get them to make a decision to be better was I was living a lie.
Right.
I wasn't in integrity with anything. And it really it beat me down and it got me to the point to where I was either going to shut the thing down or create my own system. So I started looking at the mental health side of things we had with the wellness business. And I took most of that. I took the motivational interviewing components, the cognitive behavior therapy components, acceptance and commitment therapy, a little bit of the trauma and recovery aspect. And I moved it all in to create this psychotherapeutic sales system.
Wow.
And then I did it myself with 3 or 4 thousand sales calls initially before scaling it out.
Just 3 or 4,000 before scaling it out. That's amazing. That's so good. That's a great test trial, right? Three to
Yeah.
4,000 people.
Put yourself through the
So
ringer.
right? I seriously, but I bet you learned a lot. I bet you learned a lot, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so tell me a little bit of you don't have to go through the whole thing, but tell me a little bit about it, right? So, because this is something I will say that you, Chandler, are probably in a really sweet niche because I've never heard it put this way before, right? And so, tell me a little bit about that. What, because people are always like, I'm not a salesperson, that's not what I can do, or they're the opposite. We're like, I'm a great salesperson if they can force you or twist you into doing what they want, right? So, tell me a little bit about this system that you have and now that you scaled it out, what makes you so proud of it? Like, what is it that you've seen come out of it?
Yeah, good question. So basically, the system comes down to three major components. We have a 9 step framework, but in order to make any sort of framework work, you have to have these psychotherapeutic shifts to install the system. And the first system that I looked at was we have to detach from the need to sell.
Mhm.
So when you look at dynamics work, think about like dating. When you chase somebody hard and you're like, what are you doing? How are you doing? You're texting them all the time. They don't want anything to do with you anymore. You're
Right.
quote unquote needy. And they start running away. Same thing in sales. When I come up to someone, I'm like, what can I do to get you to buy today? Now I have commission breath. I'm salesy. They don't want anything to do with me. So they run away. So even if you need the money, you have to detach from that need and move to more of a conversation. So it becomes I don't need this. Why do you even want to buy this thing? Are you sure? And so we have a bunch of different frameworks we
Mm,
teach people in order to be able to detach. And then when you detach, it seems like you're not that interested in selling this person. So guess what? They want it more, and they come at you and they start asking you questions.
mm,
So you draw them in by creating this sort of mysterious persona. Like, why does this guy, what's wrong with him?
right. 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 Now, okay, so say you're getting into this sales call, right? Do you feel like everyone is to be sold, if you will, at the end? I'm probably wording that wrong. Or do you actually intentionally go in thinking this may or may not be somebody I want to work with?
Yeah. So and this is our third concept, becoming a challenging leader. The thing is, if we try to enroll everybody, and if we say, hey, anybody who has two legs we'll work with, you end up with clients you don't want to work with, and you
Yeah,
end up with a lot of refund requests. So
right.
what we do is throughout the entire conversation, step one, we come into the conversation saying, okay, I'm going to sort of figure out if it makes sense to actually work together. Are they a good client for me? Am I a good coach for them? And you're going to challenge them along the way. One of the problems we have with a lot of us as coaches is we're people pleasers. We want to make people happy. We want to do good things. But if we enter this conversation and we only focus on people pleasing, we end up with all the clients we don't want to work with.
Right.
So by becoming a challenging leader, and work to really understand their coachability and whether or not they are going to be a good client.
Right. So when you're getting into this the business that you're in, the coaching business, let's talk about that a little bit. So what is it that you're doing there with your client? Like if somebody calls you, they want to be a client. I'm talking to all you people out there who are listening. So if you want to, like, if somebody wants to work with you, Chandler, what does that look like? What is that to work?
Yeah, what does our sales process look like?
Yeah.
So we eat our own dog food. I follow my own system since I put myself through the ringer building it. And what it looks like is if someone wants to work with us, they'll go to one of our landing pages or download one of our frameworks, our 9-step framework. People just go to 9step.cultureofcare.life. They opt in, they put a number, takes them to a Facebook group. They get to consume a bunch of videos. Then eventually they'll book a phone call with us.
Okay.
When they book a phone call, they'll fill out an application. If the application is approved, they'll be able to get on the call. Once it's approved, they'll book their time in. Once they book their time in, they watch a series of videos to make sure that what we're doing is actually going to make sense for them.
Hmm.
And then they get reminders and stuff like that. And then they end up jumping on the call. Quite a few hoops, but it also puts us in the right place to work with the right people who are
Right.
going to be bought into what we're talking about, what we're saying, bought into
Right.
our philosophies.
Now, is what you are putting these people through, the system that you're putting them through, is it to teach them the therapeutic driven sales system, or is it to teach them the health and wellness aspect, or what part of that are you teaching your clients?
Yeah, so there's two roads now. We have compassion conversations, which people can opt in and do a call with us and figure out if they want to learn to sell with this
Oh,
psychotherapeutic
okay,
system.
got it.
Or the idea behind the health system is separate. So we still have that. And that's called the brain code rewired. So people go through a similar system because the sales system was born out of the health coach. Both systems in going through the sales process
Okay.
are essentially the same, just for different markets.
Okay, so then you grew another business basically. So now you're also helping people learn what it is to sell for their program, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what happened was I did it myself, 3 or 4 thousand conversations, and then I branched out to my team, and my team started crushing it. And then I had a bunch of health coaches reach out and a bunch of other people reach out and ask if I could help them with their sales and ask if we could do something for them. And I can't scale it by myself. So it turned into another business to where we can teach people the 9-step framework and essentially hold their hand every step of the way to
Mhm.
change the landscape of sales.
That's amazing. I mean, you must be really proud of yourself, because that's not an easy thing, as you know, because you did 3 to 4 thousand calls to get there, so it wasn't super easy. But you know what? I love what you're bringing to the table. Like, I love that you're teaching people also this strategy of having this this therapeutic driven, this psychologically based sales system, which a lot of people are not teaching, right? So that's really cool that you're teaching people that, especially people who are coaches and getting into the online space, because a lot of them, this is new to them, right? So a lot of the people I coach are women, right? So the women entrepreneurs that I coach, we're like developing these business ideas and plans that they have in their hearts, right? But a lot of them are like CEOs and, you know, COOs and stuff like that that haven't done this before, right? So what you're offering is really cool, because I think it's going to teach them not just sales, but how to do it right. You know what I mean? Like how to do it really with the person in mind. You're really smart, Chandler, too. I heard what you were saying about the loops thing, you know, going through all the hoops. And I freaking love that, because by the time, and I'm actually building something similar, not like that, but something similar, where they have to go through a couple of hoops, maybe not as many as yours, but by the time they get to you, Chandler, you are 100% sure they want to work with you, because they would have never gone through the 50,000 hoops to get there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Super
And
smart,
so
super
by the
smart.
time they get on the call, they're like, "Hey, I liked what you had to say about this and that and this, and I really like what you did with this." And so what you've already built is kind of what I call know, like, and trust. They know me
Yeah,
now, they like me, and they trust me
smart.
because they've had multiple, which removes fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And the reasons people aren't going to buy, or that they won't even show up for the call, are they're afraid, they're uncertain if it's going to help them, and they're doubtful of your leadership.
That's so smart. It's just so smart. How'd you get so smart? You seem like a young baby to me.
Yeah, I always tell people I'm just too dumb to stop trying things, and eventually they work.
It's pretty smart. No, that's awesome. So, so those are the businesses that you're growing. So, where do you want to take this? Like, you know, have you thought of, you know, what you want to do with this? Do you ever want to get back into the brick and mortar, or do you think you'll always live in this online space?
Yeah, I'm actually enjoying the online space and sort of the global capacity to operate. I don't necessarily I've considered the idea of opening up a brick and mortar as sort of a wellness social club, because it
Mm,
ties into our six pillars and the idea of getting people in the same place. We could provide services, but we've been able to grow at such a ridiculous level on both sides that right now for me the goal is I get to be the entrepreneur, and then I have managers who manage things, and then the team who actually does the work. So ultimately my goal is to continue growing this thing and try to put ourselves out of business every day, so that way we're consistently reinventing the wheel and consistently taking percentages of the market for ourselves. And then ultimately all of this allows me to buy freedom.
mhm,
And I think
mhm.
the ultimate goal of entrepreneurship is to build this structure to create your own freedom eventually.
Right. Right. But it's not easy, right? And that's the thing. I think that one of the things that people have been kind of learning, is that this does take work. It takes effort. It takes you like literally watching what the metrics are, what the system works and what doesn't. And you know, at least for some of the people that I've spoken to, some of them, not all of them, but some of them think that it's just a one and done. Like they can just put out one video and people are coming. And Chandler, that is not the way it works, is it?
No, it's not how it works at all. What'll happen is you'll put out 10,000 different things and they'll all fail. And then eventually one thing will work and it'll be the most magical moment of your entrepreneurial life. And then all of a sudden you'll be able to use that to continue building and growing. But I think the thing you have to look at is everybody's afraid to fail. Everybody's afraid of
Yeah,
what someone's gonna say, what are they gonna do, what's gonna happen if I don't make it, what's gonna blah blah, all these what ifs. But
right.
the problem is, and the most successful aspect of an entrepreneur and someone who builds a business that's gonna work is the person who can fail forward, the person who can fail and enjoys failing, the person who can
Right.
look at it from a scientific idea and say, okay, I failed. What can I do different next time? How can I make it better? How can I adjust the process? So you really have to get in that process mindset to where
Mm,
failure is an opportunity to grow.
mhm. Do you wanna touch a little bit on what some of the pillars are?
For the sales system,
Yeah.
yeah, so there's three major pillars to the sales system. Essentially, number one is what we talked about earlier, detaching from the need to sell. And then we went over number three, the becoming a challenging leader earlier as well. And number two is really important, though. Number two is achieving level 5 listening. So when you look at the way you communicate with people, there's 5 levels. Level 1 is you're ignoring them, just literally not paying attention to anything they're saying. Level 2 is essentially pretending. And pretend listening is this: I'm on my phone and you're talking to me, and I'm like, yep, yeah, well, yep, literally not paying attention to anything you're saying, but I'm just
Right.
responding. Number 3 is responding, but only with the intent that I want to get my piece of the conversation in there. This is like
Right.
politics. Someone says, I don't like liberals, I don't like conservatives, whatever. And then you say, well, I don't like you because of this, that, and this, but you didn't hear
Right.
anything they said. You just saw red and went crazy. And
Right.
so that's level 3. Then level 4 is when you're actually paying attention, you're engaged in the conversation, but you're still stuck in your own ego. You're still
Mhm,
stuck in your
mhm,
own model
mhm.
of the world. You still believe that you're right. And then when we step into level 5, which is what we teach in our program, we call this empathetic listening. This is where we step outside of our own ego, outside of our own model of the world, and we recognize that there really is no right or wrong. There really
Right.
is no yes or no.
Right.
And we can step into the mind and step into the heart and soul of the other person and discover how their model of the world is working, where
Right.
they came from, where they came up with what they learned today, why they believe what they believe in. And then we can tap into that to create the ultimate connection that gets that person to trust you at a deep level.
Mhm,
Because what will happen in this environment is people will tell you things they've never told anybody else.
mhm.
And you become the only person they've ever been able to confide in. And when you gain that trust, that's a level of trust that no other human being has usually been given, even a therapist most
Mhm.
often.
Right. Well, that's really deep, Chandler, because that, I mean, that's totally not a sales system, right? That's totally not a sale. You're getting, and what I mean by that is you're getting into the psyche of the person, and you're actually, you worded it correctly, empathetically, listening and being a part of that. I always say sometimes, I say, things just are, and it's what emotion you put on it that makes it valid or not, makes it true or not, makes it, whatever. And that's a really great way to look at it. And I love that you're teaching that, right? Because you are 100% right that we tend to have the other stages where we're either ignoring or we're kind of acting like we're listening, or as you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, but what's my next question?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And that's what I even had to learn myself and change, because when I first started this podcast, I remember having a list of questions. And every time somebody was talking, I would be thinking about my next question. I realized very quickly that I didn't hear what Chandler said because I was wondering about the next question coming out. And that's when it changed the game for me. And I started to talk to people as human beings, as I would want to be spoken to or listened to. And that has raised my podcast to one of the ranked it on top 5%. Why? Because I listen. That's all. Right. And when you start to listen, you can connect. Like, I don't know you from a can of paint, Chandler. Right. But I do like what you're doing in the world, and I like what you're bringing. And that to me is valid and valuable, right? So I love that you are teaching people this strategy, but I also love your energy. Like I love your whole like vibe. You have a good vibe to you, and I'm sure that people can connect with that. So that's why I wanted you on here. I was reading your story and what you've been through, and growing up with somebody who is bipolar. I know is not an easy thing. I have bipolar in my family as well, so I've seen what that can do to someone. And so I'm super proud of you because you could have done anything with that, or you could have went anywhere with that, right? So how long is your system? Like, how long is it, like if somebody from call with you to launch, let's say?
Yeah, basically the way it works is we have a 9-step framework. We go through it in about a 9-week curriculum. We give people a
Okay.
couple of just a lot of leeway so they have enough time. But what'll happen is they get on the call, they decide they want to enroll, and then they join our system. So week 1, they watch a module, then they have to video themselves kind of actually doing the task of communicating, or they have to write it down, then they
Oh
submit it
wow.
to us. We look
Okay.
at it and say, "Hey, look, you got this, this, and this down, but go back and work on this and then resubmit." Or, "Hey, you've achieved mastery in level 1. Let's move to level 2." And so the reason I set it up that way is because I don't want it just to be a course where you watch a video. I want it to be an actual
That's
program where
good.
you work
That's
to
good.
achieve
That's good.
mastery. And when you graduate, I can give you a stamp of approval and say, "Hey, I watched 100 hours of this person's videos, or I watched 10 hours of this person's videos," or however long it was. But I can give that stamp of approval and say, "This person is Compassion Conversation certified and they're ready to go." So that way, when people enter our program, sometimes they only have like a 2 to 5% close rate or enrollment rate. When they
Mm,
leave our program, we want them at a minimum of 30%. And when you think about that, even 5% to 30%, that's a massive revenue bump for people without any marketing.
right, right. And so when they're doing the program and they're videotaping themselves, answering or working with the module, is there also uh an aspect of it where there's groups, or there's a one-on-one, or there's any of that, or is it just module video like that? How does
Yeah,
that
so I kind of moved away from the sort of group coaching environment. What
work?
we do
Okay.
now is they watch modules, they submit their work, but they have access to us in our messaging center. So they can ask a question and we typically respond within about 15 minutes.
Okay.
So they have pretty high level access to the team to ask questions. So if they're watching a video and struggling, they just ask a question, or they could submit something they've been working on. We'll spit it right back to them. If they're really struggling or they want to role play, they can schedule a call with our team and
Mhm,
then they'll
mhm.
get on and role play with them. So they get one-on-one and direct access to our team. And the reason I went away from sort of a group coaching environment to this was it raised our client success rate from, I mean,
Really? That's
we were
awesome.
about a 93 and now we're about a 98%. And so for me, when I look at business, it's the opportunity to make sure clients are successful. And essentially, if I can get a client success rate that's 97% or higher, I build a referral machine. And
Right,
one client turns into three turns into whatever. And it's this exponential hockey stick like growth pattern.
right, right. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. Because I would have thought that, somebody would want more of that hand holding, but it sounds to me like your clients are really built for being self-sufficient in many areas and just reaching out when they need that hand holding, right? Or when they need that support, if you will, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Really interesting. Yeah.
there
Go
was
ahead.
an interesting thing we actually figured out along the way too. One thing was we used to give out one call a week. We would give a client would have to do a call with us once a week. And what happened was it just turned into people staring at each other. And there
Hmm.
wasn't really a lot of productivity driven out of that. And what we found was shifting to this environment to where you watch a module, you do your checklist, then you submit your work, you can ask questions or book whenever you need it, moved people into a place where when they do book calls or when they do ask a lot of
It's
questions, they're
intentional.
very powerful and they're very intentional, and we get
Mm.
really good questions from people.
That's really good. And I know that was a lot of work. I know that was a lot of work, Chandler, because to build a system out like that is not easy, right? Because you have to do the module, make sure you have your checklist done, and make sure that it's effective, right, for the person watching the module. And also to be able to have a response team to be able to respond to these questions fairly quickly, because 15 minutes is fairly quickly, so that's really smart. I don't even know if I've had a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of successful people on here, but I don't know if I've actually heard that system done that way before. That's pretty great. Like, wow, my brain is like exploding right now. I'm like, wait, hold on a second. How is he doing that? That is really cool. So when people are watching all of your videos, going through all of your modules, like doing everything they have to do before they even book that first call with you, that's aside from your system, right? That's just for the intro of what you're doing, correct? The loops that they have to go through.
Yeah, so part of the loops that they go through is what they'll do is they will go out and maybe download like our 9-step framework. So they go to 9step.cultureofcare.life and download the framework, and it takes them into our Facebook group. Then they have an intro video they watch. Then they have like 5 or 6 different modules they can watch. We do a weekly training that's free in there that they go through and they
Oh,
watch,
that's
and we tag
awesome.
people in
Okay.
it. Then when
Mhm.
they do go to book the call, they fill out the application. Then they have another like 5 or so videos to watch, and all of it's designed to just make sure that they're in the mindset to where it might make sense for them to work. A lot of it's to kind of push them away. Like we say, we detach from the sell. We're
Right.
not here to sell you. Everything is designed to make sure that when they make the decision, it's not me saying yes, it's them saying yes to
Right.
themselves.
That's so damn smart. I freaking love this conversation. That is so smart. I love smart people. Okay, so then once they get into your program, it's is it 9 weeks you think is what it takes for them to complete it, or do some people take longer, or do you even like do you have them almost on like a timed thing, like hey, you have to finish this module by this week so you can move on to the second one, or say I signed up and I didn't do it for like 2 to 3 weeks, what happens?
Yeah, so we have a series of checkpoints, and I'm pretty big on, like I said, client success. So what I do is I track progress across time, and I notice inflection points to where people fall off track and where success
Mm,
starts to falter. And so what we do is we put people on a track, like, hey, week one, you have your checklist. You need this should be done week one. This should be done week two. This should be done in week all the way to week 9, and we give them some leeway and some wiggle room. But if someone were to sign up and we didn't hear from them for a week, we would immediately call them, and then we would text them like, hey, did you die? I saw your face on the side of a milk carton. What's going on? So
Right.
our goal and the client success team's job is to make sure that everybody gets pulled back in, immediately begins working on the content and their material. Because if they don't and they disappear for a week or two, there's like a 97% chance they're never coming back. And that's the
Right.
problem with
Right. Right.
courses. Most
Right.
courses people download and they just never look at it again. So
I've
for
done it.
us, it's
Mm-hmm.
about success, not about just getting someone to enroll and get it into the product. It's
Mm-hmm.
about making an ironclad product that people actually consume and finish.
That's really smart. Was this scary for you at all to pull away from the group or the one-on-one calling? Like, were you nervous about doing something like that, or did you see that this module was working alongside that and it was just working better? How did you measure that out?
Yeah, so basically what I did originally was we had the group stuff and I take people, I would take new cohorts in and I would take them in like a beta, a gamma, or a gamma, beta, alpha platform. And
Mm-hmm.
all of those cohorts started performing better than the ones in the group cohort. So then what we did was we essentially paused enrollment and then started rebuilding the entire thing around the cohort that was the most successful.
Smart.
And
Smart.
that's kind of how we built this hybridized system to where we were able to essentially take something that was working, but take something that worked even better and then create a new system that's sort of like a hybrid system that
Mhm.
works better than anything else we've had.
Yeah, that's really smart. And so, before I let you go and wrap it up, I know that I have a lot of like entrepreneurs and really great like online space people, like, consultants and coaches and all that great stuff. So, do you work with any of them, or do you just work with the health and wellness space, or tell me about that?
Yeah, so we try to work with coaches, healers, therapists. We do work with regular coaches and consultants who are in like the biz dev world, real estate, stuff like that. The
Hmm.
biggest thing that we want to make sure is when we work with someone that they have a healthy lead flow. If someone
Hmm.
hasn't generated a lead yet and their business isn't available or there, it's going to be pretty hard to work on their sales because they just don't. That's just not there.
They're not
So
there yet.
as long as they have lead flow and it's consistent and they're just not closing deals and they're getting super frustrated, or if they just hate their life getting on sales calls,
Right.
that's when we can jump in there and help ultimately help somebody.
Okay, great. So then tell my people how they can get in contact with you or go through, watching the videos and stuff so that they can then work with you on enhancing what they're doing in their sales.
Yeah. So you can basically download our free 9-step framework to creating compassion conversations. It's literally our entire process mapped out and written out for you so you can kind of follow it. You just go to 9step.cultureofcare.life. That's the number 9step.cultureofcare.life, not .com, but .life.
Hmm.
You'll go to the page. It says just put in your name, email, phone number. Then it'll redirect you to our Facebook group. There'll be a video that says watch this first. And then we do a free training in there. I would say go through all the modules. And then when you're ready, you can book a call on our calendar. And we intentionally don't force you to book off of that first page because I want you to be ready and I want you
Yeah.
to be excited to chat with us. I don't want this to be a
Awesome.
forced environment. That's why our
Mhm.
no-show rate is next to nothing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would think so. And that's why I said that's brilliant, right? Because like I said, I'm building something similar, not what you're doing. I'm not doing sales, but it's similar in that you have to follow quite a few steps before you even get to me. For the same exact reason. I want to make sure that you're okay with working with me. I want to make sure I'm going to be good with working with you, that by the time you get to my phone call, you know exactly who I am and what I'm doing. And that's so freaking brilliant. That's really, really brilliant. I'm really happy that you came on. Thank you for being on Straight Talk. I hope that, all of you guys who are listening, listen well, because this is something I've never heard this framework done this way before. And so, Chandler, I'm super proud of you, and I'm proud of what you're putting out there. I love having people on here that bring something new, but also like challenge the way we think, right? Because sales doesn't have to be like this icky thing that everybody's afraid of. But the fact that you're teaching these coaches and consultants, which is a big growing thing right now, right? Everybody and their mother right now is a coach or a consultant,
Exactly.
right? So it's really great that you're teaching this system. So thank you for being on Straight Talk. I truly am grateful for you. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And thanks for having a great conversation and being a level
Yeah.
5 listener with me. I appreciate you and I appreciate all the listeners out here. And ultimately, my goal in the world is just create a culture of care, be nice to people. It
Yeah.
makes it a better world.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad we had this conversation. Thank you, and I will make sure to link everything below. So whatever you gave me, because I'm pretty sure I have your all of your info. I'll make sure to link all of that. So guys, come on, what are you waiting for? Get on those videos. Get on there and watch those videos on his Facebook page and all that great stuff. I mean, all I can say to you is you heard it in his voice if you're listening to the podcast, and you watched it on video, and you see that he has just this great energy about him. So I think you're going to truly enjoy working with Chandler. So make sure that you link below, because I'll make sure I have all of his information down there. You guys are the best. You know I love you to pieces. Okay, make sure you like, share, subscribe, blah, 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 blah. You know the deal. This is Neena Perez. This is Straight Talk, no sugar added. Until next time.